Hey everyone. So, as we continue our global climate unit, last time we talked about the physical consequences on the natural Earth of climate change. Today, we're going to talk about how this is going to impact humans. So, the effects of climate change are not just a natural effect, on nature itself. There's so many different potential side effects that can and will come as a result to these changes to the earth. Because in so many ways, we rely on nature, we rely on the physical earth in terms of so many different activities that become part of our everyday lives, become part of our culture. And so, not only is there going to be an effect on social life, but also economic life as well. So, in terms of agriculture, which is how we get so much of our food, as global temperatures rise, changes in agriculture patterns are likely. We talked about this last time, but there's going to be sort of a changing to the location of crop growing areas. And so this is going to grow both north and south from the equator. So, for instance, if there's wheat being grown in Kansas or in Iowa, if it continues to go further north because of the warming of the planet, suddenly that crop that has made so much money for the United States is now being grown in Canada and will be benefiting Canada's economy at the cost of our own economy. But as we sort of look at things, and if temperatures rise by 3 degrees Celsius, which is within range of the possibilities, there will be a 35% drop in crop yields across Africa and the Middle East. And so that's billions of people who are now, sort of in more food insecure areas, but specifically 550 million people who could be exposed to hunger itself. So, in terms of thinking about this more, there will be an economic hit to the country, to the United States by 2050. Um, and so, these are sort of things that need to be thought about as global economies in order to protect as many people as possible. Now, in addition to agriculture or within agriculture, because drought reduces crop yields, a lack of water, the reduction in water resources will make it increasingly difficult as well for farmers to irrigate fields and to continue growing more crops. And so crop types may need to change as well in order to become more water resistant, meaning that they need less amounts of water. And so that's either going to limit or expand crop production depending on how successful we are at sort of producing these water resistant crops that can still grow with less water. Now, another impact of climate change on specifically people and places, the effects across the world of global warming are going to be varied, especially at first. They're already feeling the effects, specifically in Central Africa and in other parts of Africa, of climate change. And unfortunately, for uh, those countries, these are oftentimes lower income or middle income countries that do not have as much in terms of resources to be able to provide for such sort of different and varied effects. And so this could lead to an increase of disease, of human migration as people are forced to move in order to find lands that can provide them food and water, as well as starvation and flooding as well. And so if we're thinking about just a rise of 2 degrees Celsius, which a lot of scientists believe is sort of like the average prediction, it could lead to 60 million more people in Africa being exposed to diseases like malaria, as mosquitoes would be able to breed in areas that were previously too cool for them. And so that exposes those people who have been able to escape the clutches of malaria. And as we continue thinking about this, I mentioned this before, but there are already communities that are feeling these effects, and this is only going to grow as it continues. We've already had our first refugees that are, claiming to be connected to the global warming as a reason for why they had to leave their homes. Now, in terms of a much smaller but significant thing from an economic standpoint, tourism and recreation would be hugely affected as well. And so this is likely to change as global warming changes weather patterns. And this could both extend summer seasons and allow more northern areas to develop as beach towns. However, in terms of winter sports, such as countries like Switzerland that depend a lot on those sort of winter sports, those could be stopped due to a lack of snow or ice. And so areas that depend on ski lodges or ski resorts in order to make a lot of money, these could be impacted strongly by the changes in weather that are going on. There's also going to be reduced precipitation in some areas. And so this may make some currently popular resorts have heavy economic losses due to a lack of water resources as well. And so all of these things need to be sort of thought through in terms of how do we tackle climate change in a way that protects as many people from, negative, huge effects like disease or starvation or flooding or migration, as well as tourism and recreation as well. Now, in terms of the sort of social problems that are going to grow out of some of these economic issues that we're talking about, these impacts on people and places will indirectly lead to other social problems. There will be, because of a lack of food resources, hunger. And so hunger often leads to conflict because people need to be able to have the things they need to survive. And sometimes, unfortunately, that sometimes resorts to violence in order to get those things. And so all of this is all going to impact all countries, because even if the weather effects of climate change are not hitting a particular country strongly, things like migration or conflict will. And so if we're thinking about just economic issues, these are more likely to impact lower income countries than higher income countries, because lower income countries don't necessarily have that technology as much. They don't have the resources to be able to as easily adapt to what is happening. And lower income countries are more likely, as we talked about with the DTM, to be heavily involved in agriculture as a part of their nation's GDP. And that's going to hurt their economy in ways that are more strong than high income countries. Coastal flooding in particular will affect countries that have land below sea level, like the Netherlands or Bangladesh. And this could lead to economic and social stress due to a loss of land and resources as well. And then climate change, in addition to that, could also put huge strains on a nation's response system, like having to put more money into things like flood control. And that could weaken the nation because you're not being able to spend money elsewhere. Now, on top of that, high-income countries are not going to be able to avoid the negative effects of this. Conflict could occur due to several factors that have been seen to raise tensions in the past. For one, economic dissatisfaction, like drought or famine, could lead to political tensions within countries. You could also have protests or coups that lead out of and come from this economic dissatisfaction that's happening because of changes to the weather. And countries are going to be squabbling over smaller amounts of resources as well. And so as people have to move in order to get things, this could also lead to other negative social effects, because greater migration could cause fighting between ethnic groups as well. Now, in terms of thinking about extreme weather events and how that's going to impact people, climate change is not just going to make things warmer, it's also going to lead to changes in weather patterns and rainfall, both in quantity and in where these are taking place. So this can continue to become more extreme as well. And so based on this, a couple probable impacts that could be concluded include 200 million people being at risk of being driven from their homes by flood or drought by 2050, an increase in storm activity, such as more frequent and intense hurricanes, and that could certainly impact people and people's lives. And then things like reduced rainfall, specifically over areas like the US and Southern and Eastern Europe, that could impact how much rain there is to be able to feed crops, to be able to keep water cycles going appropriately in balance. And this could lead to up to 4 billion people across the world having water shortages if the temperatures rise at the level that they're expected to or predicted to of 2 degrees. So in terms of thinking about what's going to happen at each of these stages, depending on how much the global mean temperature ends up rising, if we look at just 1 degree Celsius, a maximum rise in temperature of 1 degree and keeping it to 1 degree is absolutely vital for the survival of low-lying islands. And that includes places like the Maldives, which are luxury resort areas. Arctic sea ice is already disappearing at this 1 degree Celsius rise. And with that particular rise, it will continue to disappear in summer months in the future. Heat waves and forest fires will become more common in the subtropics. And so places like the Mediterranean, Southern Africa, Australia, the Southwest United States are going to see more of these issues happen, like has happened in California quite often. Most of the world's coral will end up dying, unfortunately, as well. And so that includes natural wonders like the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, and climate-related diseases like malaria and diarrhea will affect an additional 300,000 people every year. And so thinking about the Great Barrier Reef, we can already see some of the effects of the dying of this particular natural wonder. Unfortunately, we're starting to see a shrinking of the natural reef that has brought so many people to Australia, but also is just a great natural beauty that we've been able to benefit from as a human civilization and as a world civilization. Now, in terms of thinking about 2 degrees of a rise, this is the temperature limit that the scientists want because we haven't been able to stop it, and we're not expected to be able to stop it to 1 degree Celsius rise. Heat waves could kill thousands of people every year. Amazonian rainforest will turn into desert and grasslands. You're also going to see increasing carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, and that will make the world's oceans too acidic for any remaining coral, as well as thousands of other marine life. More than 60 million people, especially in Africa, will be exposed to higher rates of malaria as well. And then agricultural yields around the world will continue to drop, which will expose 500 million people more to starvation. And many of the ice shelves will also melt. This is a depressing set of news, right? So the West Antarctic ice sheet in the southern hemisphere will collapse. Greenland ice sheet will melt in the northern hemisphere. The world sea level will rise by 7 meters in the next couple hundred years. And glaciers will also recede, which reduces fresh water supply for major cities like Los Angeles. As well as 1/3 of the world's species will become extinct if the 2 degree rise changes their habitats too quickly for them to adapt. So another thing that's going on is a 4 degree Celsius. So if there's a rise to that level, there is a possibility of this if there's only an extremely weak climate deal. In terms of this, the following would happen. Permafrost in the Arctic would melt releasing methane and carbon dioxide that's currently been locked in there, like we talked about the other day. In the Arctic, ice cover would disappear permanently, and this would lead to extinction for species like polar bears that live there. And on top of the 7-meter rise that happened with a 2 degrees Celsius rise in temperature, a 5-meter further rise in sea level is expected in this case, so 12 meters total. And if you think about that, that's about 40 feet uh, of a rise in sea level. And so many island nations would be submerged at this point. On top of that, Italy, Spain, Greece, Turkey, these places would become deserts. Southern England, which is very rainy, would resemble modern day southern Morocco, which is more desert like. And so all of these things are negative effects of climate change. And so as we continue thinking about this particular subject, we want to be mindful of how we can continue to find ways to deal with and combat climate change. So we'll continue with that in our next lessons. If you have any questions, though, on the consequences of climate change, please let me know.